This week on Adventist News Network, music evangelism connects with Europeans.
How church health experts are shaping attitudes toward mental health.
And why Adventists have a United Nations representative.
These stories and more coming up. Welcome to Adventist News Network, a service of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. Thank you for joining us this week.
First in the news, Adventists offered health screenings and advice on diet and exercise at Black History Live in the United Kingdom recently. The event celebrates how African, Asian, and Caribbean immigrants have contributed to life in the UK, as BUC News reports. Adventists addressed how culture can shape a person's health.
We're here at Black History Live, the first event of its kind to be held at the Wembley Stadium. So let's go and hear now some of the volunteers, their stories, and hear from the clients themselves how they have felt about having a health screening at an event such as this. Let's go and talk to them now.
Well, I was just a bit curious about my health because it's something that I would take for granted, to be honest. So I thought, let me just give it a go and see where I am. Yeah.
Do you like vegetables?
I do. I thought I was doing okay, you know. I really did. I really thought I was not bad. But, well, I need to do a bit more, really. So.
Music evangelism is connecting with Europe's Portuguese-speaking community. Adventists in London and Sweden bought concert tickets to give to their friends, neighbors, and co-workers recently. Hundreds of community members attended concerts featuring some of the best-known Adventist artists, including Sony music artist Leonardo Gonçalves. The first unforgettable reunion concerts were held in Brazil last year, organized by Adventist World Church Communication Director and composer Williams Costa Jr. In London, many former Adventists reconnected with the church because of the concert. Local church leaders say music can reach many people who might not respond to traditional forms of evangelism.
A recent study by a Christian research agency says tithing as a percentage of income is at its lowest level in more than 40 years. The Adventist Church, however, is bucking that trend. Adventists worldwide put an average of $40 million into offering plates every Sabbath. The church still spends more on mission, outreach, and humanitarian work worldwide than it does on operating costs. Many Protestant churches in the U.S. now spend 6 times more on operating costs than they do on benevolent work, researchers said. Adventist World Church headquarters in the U.S. state of Maryland currently operates well under its cap of 2% of world tithe. This frees up more funds for outreach and mission. In recent years, the church has hired stewardship directors in many of its regional offices to educate members about how tithe and offerings strengthen the entire church.
Adventist leaders in Inter-America want to share the church's message of hope with unreached areas. They recently held a region-wide Adventist Mission Summit to brainstorm ideas. They will focus on more than 100 people groups, including Hindus in the Caribbean, Mayans in Guatemala, and Aztecs in Mexico. Church leaders from Inter-America dressed in their region's traditional costumes during the opening event. Adventist President for Inter-America, Israel Leto, pledged to focus church outreach on communities that don't already have an Adventist presence.
People with strong faith in God can still struggle with mental health. That's a message Adventist health leaders want to spread. They organized a global conference on emotional health recently to help destigmatize mental health problems. More than 500 participants from 50 countries attended the conference at the church's Loma Linda University in the U.S. state of California. Attendees learned how to recognize and treat mental health problems from a biblical worldview. Joining us here in the studio is Dr. Alan Handesides. He is Health Ministries Director for the Adventist World Church, and he helped organize this conference. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Handesides.
It's a pleasure.
Now, some of our viewers, they have friends, family, coworkers who struggle with emotional health. Now, what do you want some of them to know about approaching this subject?
Well, when we ran a biblical-based conference, we first of all wanted people to understand that everybody's broken. That includes family members who think they're maybe superior to somebody who has overt symptoms. That understanding of commonality of brokenness, or the vulnerability that we all share to mental disease, makes us much more sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate, and caring. And that's really what we want the church to do. We're not going to cure all the maladies of mental health, but if we could be more compassionate in our response to it, what a wonderful, wonderful thing that would be for the church to behave like that, to be known to be compassionate and caring.
What advice do you have for Christians out there who may be afraid to admit that they suffer from depression, anxiety, or even a worse mental problem?
Well, I think the first thing to do when confronting any problem is to recognize the problem. So they have to admit that they have a problem. We all, from time to time, will feel depressed. We're not talking about transient depression. We're not talking always about the depression that can be improved if you go and run 2 miles or 3 miles, or you eat a vegetarian diet and avoid some of the extreme fats and so forth. We're talking here about those people who have perhaps a brokenness that involves the chemistry of their brain. These people need to seek help, and not to be afraid to seek help, because there are things that can be done to help them. And the people that are feeling like this don't usually relish being told you should pray about it and pray a little bit more. You know, James said, you see somebody that's hungry, you see somebody that's naked, and you say to them, go your way and we'll pray about it. It's not much good doing that. It's the same thing if they have a mental disturbance or problem that they feel is incapacitating them. We do need to pray for them, but we need to do more than just pray for them. We need to put, as James said, food in their mouths and clothes on their back, and we need to give them help for their problem.
Thank you, Dr. Handysides. Coming up, how the Adventist Church is helping a growing refugee community in the Midwestern United States.
Welcome back. Here's Adventist Review Assistant Editor Sandra Blackmer with a preview of the next issue of the church's flagship magazine.
Christian parents of young children today face a challenge that we who are older didn't have to address when raising our families, and that's how to rear children in a technological world. Technology has profoundly altered the way in which we view our world. Cell phones, iPads, video games, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, Google, YouTube, chat. Terms and concepts abound that those of us who weren't quite so young anymore could barely imagine when we were maneuvering the teen years and taking our first steps into the working world. We rarely undergo a day now without encountering and utilizing technology countless times in one form or another. So is this good or is it bad? Or perhaps both? And what advantages as well as danger signs should parents look for in today's tech-savvy society? In this special issue of Adventist Review, you'll explore biblical principles of family relationships, methods of inculcating values from parents to children, unexpected benefits of simply eating family meals together, and connections between the use of social media and contemporary societal challenges such as childhood obesity, sleep deprivation, and academic achievement. Bible and research-based studies will provide you with food for thought, ammunition to affect change in your own families, and springboards to further study. Above all, we pray that these articles will inspire readers to develop a balanced, informed approach to the use of technology that will enhance the physical and spiritual well-being of our greatest blessing, our children.
The U.S. state of Minnesota is home to thousands of refugees from Southeast Asia, and many of them are Adventists. Videographer Dan Weber recently visited and files this report.
Recently had a chance to shoot a story that I want to share with you very quickly. I went to the city of St. Paul, Minnesota to shoot a church outreach project among Hmong and Karen refugees. Why refugees? Why is that important? Well, currently in the United States, there's 3 million refugees living in this country. If you consider the North American region of the Adventist Church, it's a membership of 1.1 million members. So that's almost 3 refugees for every Adventist church member. For the fourth quarter of 2011, the church's 13th Sabbath offering, a portion of that offering, will be going to fund the immigrant and refugee outreach work of the church. Now let's go back to St. Paul for a second. Why did I go there? Well, these two specific groups, the Hmong and the Karen, the church is working really hard to try to reach out to these people. Let's look at the Karen for a second. There's 4,000 Karen refugees in the city of St. Paul. More than 200 of those are Adventist. And in fact, they're desperately trying to find their own Adventist church. Now the Hmong, I met a wonderful woman named Blia. She works really, really hard. She's actually disabled and she can't work, but she works hard to reach out to her fellow refugees. She holds Bible studies. She works with them. She prays with them. It's a very touching story. I hope you go to our website and take a look.
Let's hear from Megan Bronner. She has this week's Adventist social media highlights.
This week, we asked you to tell us how you are integrating social media into your church. Lauderhill Seventh-day Adventist Church says they use Facebook and Twitter accounts to share a daily devotion and to advertise their weekly live stream of their church service. Brooklyn Temple Adventist Church shares their weekly adult Bible study guide via podcast on Twitter. SBMDP says her church, La Salle New Life, is also presented live every week, and they are on Twitter and Facebook. Harvey Alvarez says he shares his church's activity on Twitter with an appealing message, plus an address or website, plus a hashtag that's currently trending. Also on Twitter this week, Adventist Alumni Awards asked the question, what keeps your family at Adventist schools? 55 people answered, the Adventist spiritual atmosphere. And GC Archives commemorated a special day this week, October 22. They said, on this day in 1844, the great disappointment took place. Jesus did not return. Some Millerites give up hope, but others go back to their Bibles. This week, our Twitter hashtag is How I Share My Faith. Tell us what you've done recently to tell someone about your Adventist beliefs.
Ganoun Diop is the Adventist Church's new representative at the United Nations in Geneva and New York. A theologian and professor, Diop previously oversaw the church's global mission studies centers. He's lived and worked in 3 countries and is comfortable speaking 10 languages. We asked him to tell us why the church needs a voice at the United Nations.
The Adventist Church understands itself as an essential part of God's response to the needs of the world. And therefore, when 193 nations gather together to cooperate to improve human lives on planet Earth, Seventh-day Adventists cannot be absent, especially when you think about what the nations would like to accomplish together, for example, promoting world peace or negotiating settlements of conflicts, and also improving human lives like eradicating extreme poverty and hunger. This is one of the Millennium Goals, by the way, set by the United Nations, but also the promotion of religious freedom. Just as Adventists understand themselves as modeling the life and the teachings of Jesus Christ, of course, it is extremely important to promote peace, because Jesus said the blessed are the peacemakers. So it is impossible for a church that understands itself in such a way to not to gather or to join others to promote peace. And not only peace, but also humanitarian aids, relief of people who are suffering from various challenges. So the Seventh-day Adventists ought to be represented at the United Nations, be a voice to promote religious freedom, to promote peace, to promote human dignity, because Adventists believe that every person was created in God's image.
Diop once told ANN that he draws on Jesus' example of diplomacy in the Bible. Rather than force his values on people, he shared them through relationships based on respect for human dignity.
When we come back, our tech tip of the week.
In chapter 1 of The Great Hope, there's a description of Jesus that captivates me. He's described during the triumphal entry into the city of Jerusalem, where thousands of voices declared him king. And then as he stopped and looked down over the city, it says, the Son of God was in tears of intense agony. The majesty of heaven in tears? The scene filled all heaven with wonder. And then comes a sentence which fills me with hope. To Jesus, the loss of even one soul is a calamity. We know that he was in tears for the city, but to think that he would be in tears for even one lost soul. Clearly he loves me enough. Surely he will pursue me all the days of my life until my heart is safe with him.
Welcome back. Worried about protecting your family from unwanted web content? There is a solution, and it's easy and free. John Beckett explains.
Imagine a church that shows website addresses on the screen during the service. I've seen this a lot of places. Now imagine someone accidentally types in the wrong website address. Or maybe your kid at home is working on a school report and winds up heading to the wrong site. Unfiltered access to the internet is a real hazard even for people who don't intentionally go looking for bad stuff. Today we're going to talk about an easy way to help protect our churches and families from visiting unwanted websites by using a free filtering service. Before we get started, a disclaimer. I believe website filtering, while helpful, is never a substitute for personally monitoring and talking with kids about their web use. Whether or not you filter websites, you may also want to consider the position of the computer and the times kids are allowed to browse the web. There's a lot of filtering software that installs directly on computers. This software can be quite good, but now we have all kinds of things besides computers that can browse the web, including phones, iPods, and game systems. Instead of filtering every device, you can easily set up filtering for your whole house or church by signing up for a free service and changing a few settings in the router, the piece of gear that connects your network to the internet. I like the free service that OpenDNS.com provides. To get started, you need to sign up for a free account. The OpenDNS.com site has great instructions and a how-to video. You may want to write down your current settings as you go so you can back out if you make a mistake. Once you've set up things and turned on the content filtering for categories and sites you want to block, check back in a day or two and look in the logs section. You should be able to see a list of sites visited by computers on your network. If you haven't, you probably haven't set everything up quite right. The level of filtering is up to you. For churches, you might leave it mostly unfiltered except for a few categories like adult. That way you've provided a safety net with a fairly low likelihood of blocking something useful. To learn more, you can visit OpenDNS.com.
Adventist family ministry leaders worldwide are preparing couples for strong, satisfying marriages. Here's Elaine Oliver with more.
The Department of Family Ministries of the General Conference is delighted to partner with Life Innovations out of Minnesota with Dr. David Olson, who is the creator of the Prepare Enrich Marriage Inventory. Prepare Enrich has to do with preparing couples for marriage, and also enriching couples who are already married. One of the things that we are really interested in doing is to help couples have a great marriage. Not just be married for a lifetime, but to have a satisfying marriage. And so we've found that if we can help couples prepare for marriage, then they have a much better chance of being successful in marriage. And for those couples who are already married, if they take the time out to enrich their marriages, then they will also have great marriages. So the Prepare Enrich inventory is something that we are training our leaders on around the world. But in addition, they in turn are going to train their pastors. And we've already been successful in many different divisions in training pastors in this wonderful modality, this marriage enrichment preparation resource. So we're very excited about this opportunity to help families become stronger by strengthening marriage. Again, when we're married, it's not just important to be married, but we want people to have satisfying and happy and stable marriages.
The Adventist Church's distance learning institution recently moved to Andrews University. Lisa Beardsley Hardy traces the history of Griggs University and explains why the move will strengthen Adventist distance education.
In 1909, Frederick Griggs had a vision for taking Adventist education around the world through the Postal Service. He established the Fireside Correspondence School that later became Home Study International and then Griggs University and Griggs Academy. It spans from elementary to university graduate level courses, even to MBAs. At the end of 2010, Griggs University merged with the very first Adventist school, Andrews University, formerly Battle Creek College. Now, these two fine establishments have joined forces to deliver truly comprehensive distance education around the world. This is advantageous for Griggs University because what it lacked in its previous location was access to professors in a variety of disciplines readily available. Now, with the move to Andrews University, they're right on this campus of many teachers, libraries, many students. Also, this summer, the first group of students who completed an MBA through Griggs University graduated at Andrews University, and they were impressed to come to this beautiful campus in rural Michigan and to see the beautiful buildings. These students mostly were professionals, many who had not heard of Seventh-day Adventist education. This is a wonderful new partnership, Griggs and Andrews University.
Let's turn to Sergio Gonzalez to find out what news you reported this week.
Welcome to iShare, where you bring the news to us. This week's iShare story comes to us from Dan Weber. He's the video producer for Adventist Mission. Dan recently attended the Society of Adventist Communicators near Chicago in the U.S. state of Illinois. The convention is an annual gathering of Adventists working in technology and media in North America. While there, Dan had the opportunity to tour the world-class television studios of NBC Channel 5. Watch while Dan shares his reaction to visiting a working studio and getting a behind-the-scenes look at the daily news process.
It was interesting to visit Channel 5 because I'd been to news stations in the past, but I wanted to see how technology has changed and how news stations are adapting. There are a couple of things caught my mind. The first was that all the cameras are robotic. You don't have camera operators anymore. So that kind of minimizes the crew, but they've added people in other areas. It was fun to see the web development department where they have 5 Twitter feeds going at the same time and people are sharing in stories online, and then they are, those stories are being fed to the news department. News has really changed over the years.
If you're interested in attending next year's convention, visit AdventistCommunicator.org. As always, we'd love to hear Adventist news from your part of the world. To share your story, visit news.adventist.org and click on the green iShare button. We might feature your story in an upcoming episode.
Finally this week, let's hear from church historian David Trim. He has This Week in Adventist History.
Welcome to a special issue of This Week in Adventist History, because this week in 1844 occurred one of the most important and decisive events in all Adventist, much less Seventh-day Adventist history, the Great Disappointment. On October 21, 1844, tens of thousands of people across the United States and some in Britain and Europe gathered that evening expecting it would be their last night on earth. And on October 22, 1844, those people confidently expected that they would see their Lord Jesus Christ descending to earth in the clouds. But you know, 24 hours passed, and as the day ended, Christ still had not come. What was the explanation? Many were shattered with disappointment, and the event, of course, became known as the Great Disappointment. Some people simply abandoned hope in a real second coming. Some indeed abandoned faith in Christianity, full stop. But a small group started to study the Bible more and more carefully until they were convinced that they had misunderstood what Bible prophecy had foretold for October 22, 1844. They concluded that in fact Christ was beginning a new phase in the investigative judgment in the sanctuary. Those people were later to found the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But our history as Seventh-day Adventists start with those very first Millerite Adventists back in 1844. That was this week in our history in 1844.
Thanks for joining us for Adventist News Network. Tune in next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Until then, visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. God bless.